I want to thank everyone for joining our May 18th Intermediate Planning webinar. My name is Dan Ba, and I am a Precision Business Planning Specialist at AgSolver. And today we'll be covering planning scenarios and creating scenarios from previous year's yield data. To give you an outline of what we will be covering today, we will be creating a 2016 corn production planning scenario from a 2014 actual production corn scenario, creating a 2016 soybean production planning scenario from 2014 actual production soybean scenario, creating a 2016 corn production planning scenario from a 2015 actual production soybean scenario, and creating a 2016 corn production planning scenario from a 2015 actual production corn scenario. And then finally, we will wrap up with any questions anyone might have. And before we begin, I also want to explain the format of the webinar. So right now we're in Q&A mode, so any questions you might have during the webinar, please feel free to type them in there, and I will answer your questions along the way. I also have my contact information, such as my email address and cell phone. So if you have questions that come up later post-webinar, please feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. Close the window. So I'll hop into Profit Zone Manager. So I've created a demo enterprise called AgSolver Training Enterprise. We'll open that up. And within this enterprise, I have 4 fields. And these are the 4 fields that my family operates. And so in some of the fields, we have 2 years worth of yield data, such as the building site that has 2014 and 2015 yield data, and grandma's, which is the same. And then we also have fields that have 1 year of data. The Home North has 1 year of soybeans data, or the Ritchie Farm, it has 1 year of corn data. You could think of these fields as, say you're a producer and you just picked up a field, you only have 1 year's worth of yield information. In our case here, the Ritchie Farm, last year it was corn, and now we're going to soybeans since we're in a corn-soybean rotation. And so, but we will first start in the buildings. And for this scenario, here we're going to be creating a scenario using corn production from 2014, and we're going to be creating a 2016 scenario. So the first thing that we are going to want to do is select Copy Scenario under the field name. At the top, we have a drop-down options menu, and this will allow us to either select actual production corn for 14 or actual production soybeans for 15. We're going to select actual production corn 2014. And for our scenario name, we're going to name this 2016 corn planning scenario. And then click Save. And what we have just done is created a carbon copy of our actual production 2014 scenario with our 2014 crop budget with our 2014 yields. And what we're going to do next is set our 2016 crop budget. So in 2014, average commodity price on this field was $4.13. For today's market, let's drop that down to $3.84. Other revenue, we'll leave this blank. This is we could add an insurance payment, FSA ARC payment, PLC payment, but for us, we're going to leave that 0 for right now. On the expense side, we're going to leave equipment the same. Say we haven't made any huge upgrades since 2014. Seed cost, We could adjust that to represent today. So a seed cost, we could put in $128. Fertilizer, adjust that to say 130. Herbicide, change our chemistry program, $51. Insurance, still roughly going to be about $13. Interest, we're going to leave that at 10.7. Grain drying, handling, and hauling. Say we're going to be planting a early maturing corn hybrid. So this will allow us to eliminate drying costs. Also, the local ethanol plant will start accept corn in the fall, right around 17% moisture. So if we can get it in the field to dry down to 17%, and so we're going to delete that subcategory, and then also delete handling cost. So really our only charge is hauling. Land, you're going to stay the same. Labor, the same. Overhead, home, personal, custom hire, both at 0 still. And then finally, other. And we're actually going to just save this crop budget for right now. So we're applying today's input prices with today's commodity prices to give us a projected 2016 corn planting scenario of what 2016 could turn into. If we scroll down and view our performance for 2016, if we produce 170 bushels on this field, we're actually projected to actually lose $78 with a ROI of negative 10%. On this field is highly variable. On the east side, there is a sandy soil type, and on the west side, it's pretty good soils where you can actually produce a crop. But in terms of yield, we can fluctuate almost, I would say between 75 and almost to 100 bushels. If we want to see and filter our field on which acres are making $100 profit, we can filter by just clicking on the bar chart anywhere in gray or in green, excuse me. You can see that's where we're actually making a profit, $100 a profit or more. If we want to see where we're just breaking even, so to close out. So creating a 2016 planning scenario based off of 2014 data is really simple. It's easy, especially since it's the same crop. Next, we will create a 2016 soybean production planning scenario from a 2014 actual production soybean scenario. And for this, we are going to hop into the Greenless field. For this, we have both yield data from 2014 and 15. In 2014, it was soybeans, and in 2015, it was corn. So just like in our original scenario, we're going to copy scenario, name this scenario 2016 soybean planning scenario. Under our options menu, we're going to select actual production soybeans 2014. And then we'll click save. Just like before, we've created a carbon copy of our 2014 actual production scenario and just relabeled it and created it as a planning scenario. Next, I'm going to select options right next to the scenario name. Click on edit budget. For this, we'll adjust commodity price down to, and from $12.47 to, let's say, if we can get, say, $9.40 for soybeans. Other revenue, we'll leave it 0. Seeds cost, say, let's drop that down to $55 an acre. Fertilizer, $60. Excuse me. Herbicide and insecticide, $51. Insurance, we'll leave that at $8.90. Interest, land, we'll leave that the same. Labor, overhead, home, personal, custom hire, both at 0 still. And then finally other, and we'll click save. Now, here we have our profit map of the Grandma's field projecting actual production or planning for 2016. So on this 116 acres, if we produce 62 bushel soybeans again, we could actually withstand making a profit of $39.87. Have a return on investment of 7%, production efficiency, which is bushels per $1,000 spent. So with the budget that we have in place, we're producing 114 bushels per $1,000. Acreage opportunity ratio, 35%. This is showing which and how much percentage of this field is operating against a negative return. That doesn't mean that we're losing that 35%. It's just expected against a negative return. Working capital opportunity of 22,000, total field expenses of 63,000, total field revenue of projected 68,000, with a total field profit of $4,624. Now I'm going to move this over here. Say we want to look at the yield map from 2014. So, and I have this field scaled at a resolution of 10 foot, so you can see which direction that we harvested the field at. If we go to and display our return on investment map, break-even yield increase. So you can see anywhere in the whitish red, you can see where we need to increase yield to break even. And the backstory within this field, this area on the south side of the field, we have a water management issue in that area. So last fall we pulled tile along the south side here to alleviate that. In the northeast corner, we actually have a compaction issue. This is an area where we pull semis in and load out of the grain cart. If we want to see the break-even commodity price map, so for this we're going to need about $11 soybeans, which 2 years ago in 2014 was doable. Next, we have our break-even expense decrease. So on these areas, we need to decrease expenses by, in the red areas, by $127 an acre. So you can either increase production or decrease expenses in these areas. And then finally, we have our production efficiency with our table on the right here. We'll go back to our profit map. Next, we are going to create a 2016 corn production planning scenario based off of 2015 actual production. So in this case, say you only have 1 year's worth of yield data, and on that year it's a soybean crop. So even if you adjust yield, you're still not going to reach your expected corn production for this coming year. So in this scenario, we're going to follow the same format again of copy scenario, name this scenario 2016 corn production planning scenario. And click Save. Then when we're working with soybean yield data and we want to adjust it to a corn yield or a representative corn yield, the procedure is a little different. After we label our new scenario that we've just created based off of the previous year's soybean yield data, we're actually going to click Add Zone, which is right underneath the scenario name that we've just created. After we click Add Zone, we're actually going to select the whole field zone button, the little square with the horizontal dashes through it. And for this field, or for this zone, we're going to call this corn crop yield adjust. Because we need to adjust the yield from 54 bushels to say 180 bushels or 200 bushels to represent our projected yield for 2016. So after we name our zone, corn crop yield adjust, we'll first come and drag our target zone yield to increase it by 100%. But if we go to the little box to the right, we can actually increase this north of 200, because even if we increase our yield by 100%, that's only going to get us to a corn yield of, say, 108 bushels, which really isn't realistic for this area. So just to give us a starting point, we're first going to select, say, we're going to increase yield by 225% increase in yield. Now we have our soybean crop budget that we used from 2015. We'll go ahead and readjust that. Commodity price we'll put in at 380. Other revenue we'll leave at 0. For our equipment charge, we're going to increase our cost by just a little bit to account for corn production. We're going to increase tillage by $11 to get us to $61 an acre. Seed cost, we'll go adjust this from $62.88 to $128 an acre. And how I'm figuring seed cost is, say we're going to plant a hybrid of that cost on a per bag, say the bag costs $280. You take 280, divide that by 80,000 for 80,000 seeds per bag, and then that will give you your price per thousands of seeds, and then you just take that number by your expected planting population. So if we're in 20-inch rows, we're going to be taking that number, that price per thousand seeds times, say, 36 to give us $128 seed cost. Fertilizer, we're going to bump that up to $130 to represent fertilizer cost. Herbicide, that's at $51 now again. Insurance, move that up to $14. Interest, $10. Delete handling, but we'll have $18 an acre in hauling costs. Land cost is the same. Labor, we'll leave that the same. Overhead, home, personal, and custom hire, both leave the same. And then finally, we'll leave $20 in for other revenue for our 2016 budget. Click Save. And so our whole field zone is selected, and we've adjusted our yield. So here, when we increase yield by 225%, we have a projected zone yield, and the zone is taking account the entire field. So now we have expecting a yield of 192 bushels an acre with a profit of $1.95 an acre. Hey, we're going to make a little bit of money and then have a return on investment of 0.3%. Our production efficiency is 263 bushels per $1,000 spent. Still, we're having an acreage opportunity ratio of 43%. And then finally, on this 67 or 68 acres, we're going to be making $132 across the entire field. Now, what I like to do is say 192 bushels is a good starting point. What if we increase and edit our zone, and we'll come in, edit our budget under the zone called corn crop yield adjust. So instead of 250%, what if we bump that up to 260? Where does that get us? It's updating. So now 197, we'll go and edit the budget one more time and say, what if we go to 300%? Then click Save. So now we're looking at a field average yield of almost 220 bushels. And for us in Northeast Iowa, that was pretty common last year. So this is one of those scenarios where we could base off of projected yields, projected commodity prices, and then projected inputs. And then throughout the year, we can add our as applied maps. So in our PZM Essentials webinar, I demonstrated how to upload our 2016 planning maps to AgSolver and the DBM box. So, and then those costs associated would be applied to this field. If we wanted to view projected yield map. So, and in this field, we have an issue with water management in the northeast corner. And then we have a waterway running through here. And then if we scroll in, there's actually a sandy soil type right inside on the other side of the waterway. So, and those are known issues, and we're trying to create scenarios to help alleviate these issues. If we look at our return on investment map, our projected return on investment, break-even yield increase, break-even commodity price, break-even expenses, and then finally production efficiency. We'll go back to and that's how we create a corn production scenario based off of soybean yield data. And why we're using the soybean yield data is to allow us to see the variability within the field. So we can also use our soil-based yield data, but it won't give us the high resolution that our yield maps can provide and view the information in 10-foot resolution. Next, we will create a 2016 corn production planning scenario from a 2015 actual production scenario. And you can think of this scenario, say you're working with a producer or you are a producer that is corn on corn. It's just simply creating a scenario based off of last year's yield. Much like scenarios that we're creating on the building site field and grandma's field, where we are using 2014 yield data. We'll go ahead and copy scenario. We'll come in and name this 2016 corn production. Scenario. Click save. Then we'll come to our edit budget. Come in. Say for commodity price, instead of 385, could be a projected 365 or even 350 even. Other revenue, we'll leave that at 0. Equipment, roughly the same. Seed cost, we'll adjust that to $125. Fertilizer, leave that same. Herbicide, insecticide. Say on this, we'll actually increase that to $6. Say we apply a fungicide late in the season or we're planning on it. Insurance, interest, grain drying, handling. Say on this field, we're actually going to be drying the corn on site, handling, hauling, all that's in there. Land costs, labor, overhead, home, personal, custom hire, and then finally other. Creating scenario. Now say based off of last year's yields where we had 216 bushels, now we're actually projected to lose about $27.50, negative return on investment of about 3.5%. But really, we have pretty good production efficiency at 205 bushels per $1,000 spent, but we have an acreage opportunity ratio of 66%. Working capital opportunity of 56,000 with a total field expenses of about 85,000, total field revenue about $82,000, and then with a total field profit or profit loss of just a little under $3,000. And you can see majority of this field is break even or close to break even. And when I see a map like this, for me, it tells me one of two things. Either the commodity price is too low, or depending on the rent or land cost, that could be adjusted accordingly. Move that over here. We want to look at a yield map based off of 2015 yield. So in the northwest corner, we have a water management issue where there was iron ochre, and we also put an additional 4 lines in the northeast corner. We have a rampant turkey and deer population in this group of trees, so whatever the turkey doesn't pick out of the ground, the deer will eat. So we thought about possibly putting that area into a buffer, just seeding it down to a cover crop. So if we look at a return on investment map, and we do have a waterway right here. Break-even yield increase. So on these areas where we had the turkey and deer issue, we need to increase in yield by about 67 bushels per acre. In terms of corn production, break-even commodity price based off of our 2016 2016 budget. You can see that we're going to need to have a break even of right around $4. So, and even higher on these high loss areas. Break even expenses, and then finally production efficiency. Go and deselect that. And to get these map layers, we have a map icon in the top right hand corner of the screen where you can see all the different map layers on your fields. And then I also want to create one more scenario. And on this scenario, we'll be taking a corn crop yield and then decreasing that to represent a soybean yield. So we'll stay in the Ritchie farm here and we'll copy a scenario and we'll name this possibly 2017 soybean production scenario. We're going to base this off of 2015 corn planting data. So say we're in a rotation where it's 2 years corn, 1 year soybeans. Go ahead and click save. And much like where we created a scenario based off of soybean data and adjusted that to represent corn yield data, we'll come and do the same thing where we'll create and add a whole field zone and click on our whole field zone button located at the bottom. And we'll name this zone soybean yield adjust. So for our zone we produced 216 bushels an acre. And for this, just to give us a starting point, let's say we'll decrease target yield zone by a starting point of 100%. Commodity price, we'll go 915 soybeans. Other revenue, we'll leave that at 0 right now. Equipment, say we plan on no tilling the beans, so we're going to delete our tillage subcategory, but increase our sprayer costs by $4. Seed costs, instead of $115, we'll readjust that to say $65. Fertilizer, drop that down to $80 an acre. Herbicide and insecticide, say we're going to project to spend roughly in budget wise about $60 for our protection package. Insurance, we'll leave that the same. Interest, leave that the same. So for soybeans, we're going to reduce and take out our drying cost, our handling cost, and say we're just going to sell to direct to the elevator, local elevator, where they actually include trucking cost within their contract. So we have a grain drying, handling, and hauling cost of 0 since that is already being taken out when we sell the grain. Land cost is $273. Labor, overhead, home, personal, and custom hire is all the same. Go ahead and click save. So now it looks like, so we actually decreased our yield so much that we don't have any yield on this field. So we'll come in and edit our budget. we'll edit our budget under the zone called soybean yield adjust. Instead of negative 100%, we'll adjust this by 50%. You can either adjust numbers via the slider or just simply type it in at the right hand side. So before, why it was displaying in all red is because we weren't displaying any yield, so we weren't having any profit from the field. Now when we scroll down, you can see right now we're having 108 bushels soybeans. So we'll go back into our zone and edit the budget again. Instead of negative 50%, we'll go down to negative 75%. See where that gets us at. Updating. So now this is a little bit more realistic for us. So our zone average yield on this field is 54 bushels an acre. You come down, look at our profit per acre is actually going to be a negative $116 an acre, return on investment of negative 18%, production efficiency of $88 per $1,000 spent, with a total field loss of close or right around $12,600 across the entire field. Now you can come in here and I like playing out various scenarios that monitor the crop health and also the overall condition of the crop. So say that this year starts to turn dry, and instead of a 54 bushels an acre, what if we drop that to negative 80%? Just updating to 43 bushels an acre. Now, since we're having a reduced yield, that might be able to trigger a insurance payment. So we can come in here under our zone, edit the budget, and add in, before we didn't have a insurance payment, so we could come in and click on our add subcategory, have an insurance payment of say $20 an acre. How does that affect the performance of this field? Now, when we look at this, we're still losing $195 an acre, return on investment of negative 32%, and losing $2,100. Now we'll come back up to our buildings, or actually we can look at our scenario in a Ritchie field where we're comparing our 2015 actual production scenario against our 2016 corn production scenario. Excuse me. Under the options drop down menu, you can click on and compare scenarios. Just loading here. So on the left hand side, we'll have our actual production scenario. And when I describe these scenarios, we have actually three different scenario types. Actual production is what actually happened the previous year. So we'll take your yield data along with your crop budget and then apply that and create that as your actual production, which is a starting point or baseline. And then planning scenarios. These are scenarios that you're thinking about implementing during the current year or coming next year or 2 years down the road, where we're taking that yield information and adjusting it along with the crop budgets. It could even be, say we want to see the performance of if we incorporate a pollinator habitat or CRP within the field. And then the third type is finally implemented, where say we are planning a CRP scenario and taking out a proportion of the field, and in that scenario is just we transition that from planning to actually implemented, where we implemented that CRP use case. So, but to go back to compare scenarios, we'll go and click on actual production 2016. So you can see between the 2 years how financially stable we'll be. So in 2015, where we produced 216 bushels, we had a profit of $75 based off of the commodity prices, the input prices. We made our 10%. We hit our 10% goal. Well, in today's market conditions, we're actually going to lose $27.50 an acre. Production efficiency goes down from 285 bushels per $1,000 spent to 275. And then our production efficiency or acreage opportunity ratio changes, and then our overall total field profit changes. And then we can come down and look at our financial histogram and see it's shifted to the left a little bit. So now I want to open up, if anyone has any questions, to please type your questions in the chat box and we will answer them. I want to thank everyone for joining our intermediate planning webinar today for May 18th. I also want to mention that this webinar will be posted onto YouTube either later today or early tomorrow morning, so you can go back and review each of the scenarios that we created, whether we're creating corn production scenarios or soybean scenarios based off of the varying years of data. And also in the chat box, you have my contact information, my email address, and cell phone. And we can set up personal webinars to work through your fields. And we can do a screen share so I can see your computer through mine. So plenty of ways to help and also provide support. So Ted asks, can you use normalized yield data and use it as a layer instead of individual crop years? Or does that defeat the purpose you're trying to do and complicate it? There's actually a couple different ways that we can create and work this scenario. So yes, if you can create a normalized shape file, so say you have yield information based off corn for say 2013, 14, and 15, and you create that into a normalized yield shape file and upload that, we can use that and create scenarios based off of that normalized yield data. Also, I want to come in and we have a scenario called multi-year average. And in this scenario for the buildings field, this is taking into account both corn production of 2014 and soybean production of 2015. Down the road, we're going to have the ability to create scenarios based off of this multi-year average scenario. We're not there yet, but come later this summer, we will be able to create scenarios based off the multi-year average. So, but for time being, if you have a normalized yield shapefile, you can upload that, and then we can put that into your field so you can start creating scenarios based off that information. So if there is no more questions, I'm going to sign out. And if you're working in the fields, please be safe. So sounds like we're supposed to get a stretch of nice weather here. So hopefully producers can and farmers can start finishing up. So thank you for joining today's webinar. Next week we'll be having another set group of webinars, and so in this webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel. So thank you and have a good rest of your day.